radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output. But very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time: cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for mini Ice Age conversations. I'm your host, David Dubine, creator of the Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age 2015 to 2035 video series. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this beautiful blue planet. Take a breath to enjoy the moments. Reanimator in the house. Can't believe that they're reanimating worm-like animals frozen in Siberia after 25,000 years. No, there could be no problems with that. I don't think so. Do you? And as we go through the trajectory of news stories from the CDC with the emergency meetings about heart inflammation from jabs, etc., that's, you can find an enormous amount of that news across the airwaves. But jumping the shark, which not a lot of mainstream media wants to talk about, global Earth temperatures are now 1/10 of a degree below the 1979 to 2000 baseline. And that's even with the hottest model on the web called Climate Reanalyzer. And it still shows global temperatures below the 30-year average drop. So where's the global warming? Sure isn't in Scandinavia, where they're receiving heavy summer snow along with Iceland. Wherever you look, it seems that the web outages, the climate moving into a food-destroying, shrunken growth season, hyperinflation / core inflation slugfest. Narratives need to be built on top of narratives for distraction across the real causes of life change that we're all facing. I'm glad you're with us tonight here. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And Ransom Godwin, 420 TV Freedomist Film 1776, is joining me as always. We're going to rant about a few things here. But Ransom, it's been an amazing week. The rains have been nonstop. It's been colder than average in Tennessee. And if anything, June is like July. I don't know. How much summertime growth will we have before winter sets in again?
I don't know, but I'm in the hundreds and no rain, and my plants don't want to grow for some reason, even though they're getting plenty of water. It's like they just don't like the sun this year. Does that sound weird? Because like last year at this time, with less effort, I had bigger plants. This year, not so much. I mean, they're still there, they're still growing, but not the same kind of growth as last year. And I'm not, to my knowledge, not doing anything different.
Yeah, you're about the 36th person who said something about reductions in growth yield. I follow a bunch of different gardening channels, and it's kind of hit or miss where this UV damage is happening to different plants. You think, we're on a global surface that's a round, pretty much even circumference ball, ellipsoid, for a better term, spinning through our spiral arm of the galaxy. That space radiation and whatever particulates, particles from the sun, energized particles, would hit our Earth's surface uniformly. You'd think we'd have the same result across everywhere, but it's not. It's really hit or miss. Like Tennessee's really incredible growth this year, although, like I said, it's been nonstop rain for, over a week and a half. Immense cloud cover. So maybe that's it. The cloud cover is deflecting some of these energetic particles or absorbing them. But with the UV damage and the UV reduction in output, how much of that over the overall food crop is that affecting? Because, as a couple stories I've been doing over the last week, Brazil is in a 100-year mega drought. along with Argentina. So any extra production that was coming out of those two countries to fill up what would be lost from what you're referencing here, UV losses or some kind of plants not responding the way they should during the grow season. And Australia with that mice infestation down there that ate up pretty much their entire crop unless they had it in an airtight grain storage facility, which is almost nil. I mean, where's the extra grain going to come from? Nature's starting to throw some curveballs. I really think 2021 is going to be the year that we cross that line of not coming back until after 2024.
So I'm a little bit slow here. I just put up your article about this reanimation here, which is the plot of all the greatest sci-fis, right?
Yeah, fully.
20,
It's right in time for the new outbreak, is it not? Oh, we just reanimated an extinct bacteria or virus or something from 24,000 years ago. Oh, it escaped.
no, that's cute. Earlier I was watching and I kind of want to get into this. I know I drag you into it. It's kind of the woo-woo stuff, but I've been watching so much stuff kind of proving to me that they are definitely about to tell people that extraterrestrial life exists. And actually, they already have been in a way. And they've been also kind of putting it right in your face that they have these technologies, that they acquired them, that they've been using them. And so what? So, they're coming out with this big report this month, and the sneak peek on it already says that, the government is at this time not going to admit that UFOs are extraterrestrials, that they can't say that, but they will admit that they are there and that they have been there for 70 years. They've been tracking them. And also the fact that they've admitted they have recovered, hardware. So technology, reverse engineering. And then that these same people are putting human beings on disruptive technology lists and not letting them, naturally figure out how to go forward there. But I'm watching article after article. It's just all UFOs now. Everything's UFOs. And I had that theory about, that one might crash and just have a chimera in it, and that's exactly what I'm also seeing through news and entertainment. It's kind of like feelers of what they're going to throw at you next. So I just finished a show on Netflix called Sweet Tooth, which is about a vaccine company, ironically, that's trying to make vaccines to make the world a better place. Yet there's some bad things that also happen. And somehow they've made some chimeras, and now all of the human babies on Earth are now chimeras of mixes of some kind of animal or another. And we know that China and other countries they're all doing this. The United States is already doing this. It's not science fiction. There's many companies in the US that grow human animal chimeras already in the labs. Now, supposedly, they let the embryos not get that far and they terminate them. However, I'm also seeing in the news that they're changing the laws around to let not just human embryos longer so that they could do scientific research, but also, you would think that the other kinds of embryos like chimeras and things like that would fall into that. But anyway, the show on television, all the children now, they're chimeras, and there's a sickness, that killed most of the world's population. So everybody had to restart, and really the only people around are the people that are smart enough to farm, and and then there's the people that just take stuff from people. It's kind of bizarre. It looks like that's where we're going, but then you throw the ET concept on it, and it's like the biggest scapegoat of ever. And you can see when that mainstream media is controlled, I would think most of the audience would agree, is all taking part in the alien idea of life somewhere else and UFOs and all of these things, and steadily scientific, different projects like they're having. I saw one that they were talking about, we probably accidentally already spoiled Mars with fungus and tardigrades and other extremophile bacteria. So we're about to enter literally a brave new world, and it's going to catch up to people faster than they can deal with it.
Well, let me add a little bit of woo-woo sauce on top of the woo-woo there. If we go back into the Vril Society and what the Germans were into extracting information from a different star system to build anti-gravity craft during World War II, which was found by the Allies, the Bell. It was in an electromagnetic, say, structure that was able to float. Now, you mentioned a 70-year time frame, but if we go back just shortly after World War II, I mean, they would have been able to, whoever had brought the technology forward, whether it was Foo Fighters and it was some kind of cloaking device, which brings us into the free energy, because they find that these plasma discharge frontal boundaries on these craft that allow it to exceed anything in what we would consider normal, flight engineering, because it's able to put a plasma edge on the craft itself to bend through, not air, but it's creating a bubble between the touching of the actual air, which we get into the slowness, and that's why jet aircraft can only go certain Mach 17 maximum, or missiles can only go Mach 17 max, because it starts to become a physical substance at that point that has the drag, but you put, a plasma edge on that and you can cut right through it. So go back to the Vril Society and the esoterics, and, the Nazis were all into that. They were running around the planet. Indiana Jones, the movie, the very first one, was very much based on that 1929 to say 1939 era of the Germans running around the planet and looking for anything, any object, esoteric, to be able to give them the edge, because a lot of these talismans or whatever they might be do have a lot of energy inside them to unlock. And that was the thing. They were really literally running around looking for the Ark of the Covenant. But at the same time, the Vril Society was connecting with, I think it was Halderon, different star system, and channeling blueprints, if you will, for anti-gravity craft. Now, that's one whole chapter. And then after World War II, Allies find all this, and then we bring it up. And if you follow the trajectory of what was found with the Bell, quote unquote, and you bring it into the 1950s, then you start to get a lot of people like Otis T. Carr, that's C-A-R-R, was one of the earliest researchers that was into the electrogravitics, anti-gravity field of study for propulsion and also weightless transportation. And then Dr. Brown took it over in the 1960s and started to head up the programs. And this is where they started to put things on tethers, like ropes on an object, and get things to spin around and try to control this at a much deeper level. And then they're started using Tesla coils and oscillators inside there, where they had different layerings of Tesla oscillators layered on top of each other. So when you put the charge in there, it would make the craft bank right or left. So with that whole release of information, we're coming into the Great Reset, quote unquote, and a new energy source has to be given for this reset. It can't continue with natural gas and fossil fuels, and even mining and smelting and putting up bits of junk for all these solar panels and wind farms that become, green e-waste. If they're, and that's such a oxymoron, green e-waste. But they're going to have to be an entirely new power system to come in with this new reset. So we got the cryptocurrency coming in, and that takes care of the financial aspect of it. But to power a new economy, you're going to have to literally have an entirely new power source. And this, you're talking about the release of information, the data dump. Well, in these data dumps, along with these UFO craft, they are discharging electricity. So not only would it be weightless for transportation, supply chains, delivery, etc., but the discharge off of these craft, if you're going to have a hovering stationary object, it would discharge electricity. So you could put it in your home and have a never-ending running power supply on something that's the size of like a small, tiny filing cabinet perpetually for the rest of your life. And then you could scale that up for a neighborhood, of course. So we got cryptocurrency for a new way of life, for a new economy. We got new power systems coming in, electrogravitics and perpetual power, free energy, if you will, for a better term. I know that the energy is coming out from a magnetic source outside our own solar system. I get it. Nothing's free. It's just the way you harvest it back on our planet here. It appears free. But then what you're talking about, this third thing, the chimeras, it's a new race. So, I mean, you get all this kind of thing mixing together. So I hope that was a bunch of woo-woo sauce on top of your woo-woo burger there.
Yeah, but the whole thing is though that it's no longer woo-woo. I mean, I know that most of the UFO things they're still putting it through the tabloid type websites and stuff like that. However, no one's arguing it, no one's discounting it. If you go look at their sources, these things are really being said by the Pentagon. And you were just talking about that. Here's one that says perfectly spherical UFO with mechanical lightning spotted past hurtling past the ISS. But just the whole idea that we're going into this weird brave new world of chimeras, mRNA technology, and I'll leave it at that. You see where our future's going, and the fact that people are arguing that it's for your benefit or for your health or whatever. When is the last time that you've seen a worldwide organization set up chemotherapy for a dying cancer person, if that supposedly helps them? Or when's the last time you've seen the world move all together to stop smoking or something like that? Anything that would benefit society's health, because it's pretty obvious that with certain industries in health that there's no goal or no benefit for them to cure. They need to treat, and that's just the way we're set up. But now we're mixing politics and new technologies along with supposed healthcare. So it is becoming a brave new world. And then, I've been watching cryptocurrency. I actually dumped a little money into cryptocurrency, and you can see a lot of money going back and forth, milliseconds at a time. And I've been studying these warehouses that they have. And if people are wondering where all their microchips and their GPUs are going, it's going into massive warehouses full of these GPUs running and just mining crypto or making this operation run. The only problem with this is like a tool, so you could get ahead right before things, in my opinion, are going to collapse. And I've been looking at different scenarios. You know that the U.S. military often puts sci-fi type ideas out to the public, like the idea of zombie apocalypses, like what would you do in case of a zombie apocalypse? They're always pulling your leg with these kind of things, but at the same time, they expect you to take them seriously when they're saying other things. And I'm sure you've been paying attention that everything that probably we said and got in trouble for at the beginning of 2020 and at the end of 2019 is now all come to light and is pretty much true. Even the fake news media outlets are having to concede that certain factoids are, you can't get around them about who's who paid for what they were doing there, what kind of function they were gaining, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, if I could talk about shortages for a second here. There seems to be a massive shortage on conspiracies because they've all come true. So if you can think of any new ones, because as you alluded to, everything that was considered conspiracy has been proven true. And there's really no conspiracies left because it's all out in the open. It all seems to be just part of a waking guise of narrative that's finally coming to, the light of day.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so weird to be the people that once again we're telling people about certain facts that later on the collective of people start agreeing with, because it's hard to get around some facts. Too many things have too much record keeping, actually, oddly, in the US. But now that we change over to the internet and everything being digital, it's so easy to replace reality. I was looking at this article here, and I thought it was funny that we sit around and debate, kind of, I guess you could call it our fears of AI and different things like that. And I'm reading articles about how the AI is actually the one that should be afraid of human beings. And it just kind of shows you the opinions of most of the media, where they see the common person as an enemy, and all of the scenarios that seem to come out of either news media or just regular entertainment media have to do with annihilation of most of the population. Now, they've already got I think you would agree, a precognition thing where they've brainwashed the public into expecting an Armageddon of some kind. So when it's offered up to them, no one really fights it too much because they've always been expecting this to happen. And then you throw in the mix of the UFOs just to confuse it. And I'm looking at all of these stories. It's just they're all wild right now. But oddly, the news has been stagnant for about a week. And I think that has to do with people getting around to real news, which is who's, paying attention to what we do about all of these things if we're going to have to deal with a apocalypse type scenario. Really, people like you and some others are really the only people on the internet actually talking about what you could do to have Armageddon not so bad for you, and just accept some of the known science, like whenever the magnetic field collapses like it is kind of right now, there's been mass extinctions. I mean, this is just proven over and over and over again. And, we are in that bubble right now. And it just happens to be at this time where all of these governmental, conspiratorial plans, plots, agendas come to fruition. I think not a coincidence that makes, not at all.
And then, adding on to some of the news headlines, expect solar storms that can topple power grids and satellites during the new solar cycle. So not only is it on top of terrestrial events, but when you start to get into these solar cycle thing, there's been a huge uptick in terms of, what you're talking about, celestial, extraterrestrial, and I don't mean ETs. I mean, the sun and different galactic arm effects, waves, the Hunab coup, if you want to go back to the Mayans, from the pulse of electromagnetic energy from the center of our galaxy. But what is it that the news media is now really super focused on? Effects from the sun, in addition to everything else. So it does seem that we are in a cycle that is well known by the elite, that is going to be massive changes on the human population and the species itself, morphing through cosmic rays or whatever might happen. The way of life, the way of transaction, the way of having something of value pegged against something else of value. I mean, it's very clear that the elites are completely aware that this system that has been in place for either 400 or 2,000 years is quickly coming to an end, and is going to be replaced completely from the ground up with something new. And all these news stories allude to that. Grid goes down, populations are going to decline. I mean, you talked a couple weeks ago, about how quickly, if the power went out on a grid down across the planet, how quickly the population would be reduced down to mere millions, tens of millions in some countries compared to the hundreds of millions that we have now. And it's really just interesting. Also, people trying to come out with good news. Norway health chief coming out saying, hey, we almost have 0 cases, and it's such a cool thing that we knocked it down from pandemic highs, and everybody's scolded him. How dare you even say it's over? It's not over yet. How dare you give people hope? It's like, what kind of mixed messages are we getting here? We're trying to knock, everywhere you look at it, seems to be more control needs to be gleaned out of this whole COVID thing, in addition to the fear of the skies, the fear of the sun, fear of the AI, the fear of the inflation. It's just like this. If you're going to scare somebody and turn on their resonant frequency for something else to feed off of in an interdimensional level, then imagine what kind of resonance this planet's putting off and what kind of beings are being drawn to here to feed off of this energy. If you want to take it to an 8 billion type of scenario, hive mind type of thing. But whatever's going on, we are absolutely in some massive changes to the point where everything is going to be a new moving forward. We're just going to have to live through the transition. And, you and I, Ransom, are going to do just fine. And everybody listening to this broadcast, hopefully you will have prepared enough food, storable water, seeds, learn how to grow food, got some community together. It's just the people who have never lifted a finger to do any of that will not survive through this. Those that can work together and have some skills, it'll be OJT, and you'll get better every day, every week, every month. This is the direction we go. And it's been like this for, nobody ever talks about the last ice age, the last interglacial, or two interglacials ago, going back, 230,000 years. Because see, we've lived through this several glaciations, warm periods, reset of glaciation. You know what happened back then? So we've been through it many, many a times, and we are still here.
True. So most of us, you think about we supposedly have Neanderthals and all these other things. They didn't make it, or at least most of their populations didn't make it, which tells you that Cro-Magnon or Homo sapien, whatever you want to call it, had a trick up their sleeve, and I think that was architecture and farming. They were the only ones that knew, we should probably save seeds. They were probably the best at farming by that time. And I saw a article, which, if you're familiar with that, they kind of give credit to Cro-Magnon was usually about 40,000 years ago, but there's skeletal remains that go back 200,000 years of a fully modern human being with a jaw that looks like it evolved from farming and chewing grain and eating vegetables and having a good life there. And, I recently was watching, I don't know how familiar you are with Lloyd Pye. And I noticed, at that time, his information was up to date and correct, and some things have changed since then. So I'm sure he would have updated with it, but he was making some good points as far as, we're a totally different animal than any of the previous animals before we showed up. Our bones are weak, our muscles are weak. And, it got me thinking about this. What are some of the effects of space travel that we think that might happen in space? Well, one of them is your bone density going almost to nothing. Your muscle density will also decrease because you don't have the gravity to fight off of, and some of these other things. And it's weird that those traits are already found in human beings. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it depends on what spacecraft you were traveling on and then how you put the gravity field in there. Because for me, if I was on a spacecraft, I'd crank that gravity field up to Jupiter style and, come back as Hercules coming off. Like, yeah, it's cool to float and everything. And you could, float with the balls of water spinning next to you and have fun and everything. But it depends on what the magnetic field was doing on how the body would form. You're right. And, you see these giant leaps in the physiology of different creatures, beings. It doesn't matter if it's protoplankton all the way up. But sharks seem to be the only thing that haven't been so much changed by all these cosmic ray bombardments, all the earth changes. Sharks are still sharks, even after 300 million years? But we as
Yeah.
humans have gone through this iteration of how many types of, from the Homo habilis, Lucy, the timelines are way off and incorrect as well. A lot of the timelines are now pointing toward a 23 million year beginning period up to where we are now versus a couple, 3, 4 million, 5 million at the stretch. So the timelines being so far off, you hit it right there, 40,000 years versus 200,000. That's a 5x increase. Well, that would almost be very similar if it was a 5x off on the lineage or the timelines. A 5 million year old fossil relic in Africa, if it was a 5x timeline being off, that would be 25 million years, which is very close, by the way, to the 23 million years referenced. There's so many different societies across the planet, from the Indian Vedic text to the Mayans and everything in between, that we do find, even though the Aztecs had referenced the length of and set the calendars for going back that far as the beginning of a human species, whatever that would have been. I don't think they have found, because even going back 25 million years, it'd be difficult to find remnants of humans.
Yeah, you can't actually. There's other things that were human-like all over the place.
Yes.
And some of those things even survived up into the time that supposedly, we just changed over and evolved into them. But really, the fossil evidence says we just showed up. There's no they've tried for years. They've frauded things like Piltdown Man and, other things trying to show links where we changed over. But, one generation can mutate. If cosmic rays and, magnetic fields and solar particles and all these things really do boost evolution, not only evolution, but, wiping out of lots of species, which opens up, space. it seems like it would only take less than 100 years for a new species to just show up, if they all change the same way. Which, you got to keep in mind that they're claiming a big percentage of our population right now is changing their genetics, or actually, I shouldn't say that. They're protecting themselves. But anyway, like in my county, they say it's up to 30% are fully protected from the new technology, or with the new technology, I should say. Even though I don't know if we're yet allowed to say that it's new technology, because I know that was still getting you in a boo-boo, even though anybody that knows anything, even remotely a little bit about science, knows that we're talking about two different technologies, that they're claiming is the same one.
Yeah, or is
So
it
it's
to
very
prevent it, or is it to prevent an upgrade? So you have to look at it in both directions there. If you're talking about
exactly.
these cosmic energies sweeping through, obviously something's going to upgrade, change. There's going to be massive physiological, spiritual, frequency, and perception changes. So if you're in one state of protection, then that would just sweep over you and you would not even be affected in any way, shape, or form. The 30% of a population not being affected in a massive cosmic ray bombardment event. So would that leave the worker class here for the next go around? And that's what they're really looking for, is a perpetual worker class that is continuously stuck and never gets the upgrade from the cosmic energies that are coming through. That there will always be that species of human around as a worker class for these elite, or for these, some better technology enhanced societies that visit around on certain patterns, 3,600 years, etc. If you believe that type of thing.
You know, Sometimes you just got to listen in between the cracks. And I can't really play it because the way we're set up, so your side of the audience wouldn't hear it. But there's a article, and I'm going to show everybody here, at least you can see it, that's talking about meteorites and how they appear to all come from a single unknown source, study says. So in this article, they talk about how they scavenge the earth for different meteorites and material from outer space. And they've determined that, they know that the asteroid belt is made out of all kinds of different types of source of rocks. However, for some reason, all of the stuff that falls to the earth seems to all come from the same similar source. Now, that's fascinating on its own. However, if you watch the video, and I'll put the link in the chat room, you listen to this guy to the very end, and he starts talking about tons and tons of dust that fall to the earth every year. And then if you listen real close at the very end, and he says, and life inside of that. So he admits that there's life coming from space in micrometeorite dust. And I don't know why that's on there, but here, I'm going to put the link in there. So basically, this guy is admitting that life is falling on the earth, which is a theory that a lot of people have had over the years, that new viruses, new bacteriums, fungi, all kinds of things fall to the earth, and we would never notice because some of the, or at least all of it, they think maybe like the idea of panspermia, that all the genes out there in the relatively close universe would have all came from the same source, not unlike the rock. Now, the rock thing by itself is fascinating. Supposedly, it kind of makes you think of Starship Troopers, like somebody keeps slinging dust at us and rocks, all from the same spot in the shattered bracelet, or the asteroid belt. But right at the end of that, the guy says, well, there's tons of stuff falling down to the earth, lots of dust and rocks and life with it. And then the video ends.
Well, our atmosphere is pretty dense and thick. So for that kind of dust to permeate our atmosphere, imagine when it's doing up on Mars that has almost no atmosphere, where that stuff can come in nearly unimpeded.
Yeah, exactly. And then think about also whenever we have these collapsed magnetic sphere, the actual atmosphere can be pushed and compressed down onto the Earth there. So it's not so far to space, which obviously leads you to the idea that more material, not just solar material and cosmic particles, but just dust and other things, because we do call space fluid, and I think they call it fluid for a reason, because it's not empty space. It's not a complete vacuum. It's full of dust, particles, gases, and quite possibly microbes everywhere.
Yeah, you're right. Because, when you look back at these grand solar minimums, which another one we have entered past tense, and we're now in the intensification phase of it, go back in the history book and find when the plagues have arrived in mass to take down the populations, where it's so noticeable that 25% of a population on the planet disappears. It's always in these grand solar minimums. So you need to wonder the causation of, is something seeded off of meteor, comet, what it is? But during those times, always the lithographs and tapestries, etc., show the most incredible cometary tails and comet bombardment and meteor showers that are so far, like 10,000 meteors per hour kind of events. We're super happy to see 100 an hour. And usually you won't even see all 100 because so many are so small. But the lithographs of even what occurred in the early 1800s in the Dalton minimum, they were looking at something like 10,000 meteors per hour for nights on end. To the point where people were just shaking, losing their minds because there were so many coming down at all times. And the aurora that would accompany these things. So you got stories of cometary tails brushing the planet as well. So it has to be something with an atmosphere that can't protect us nearly as well. Thinner, compressed, a combination of both. Jet streams, magnetism, because we're coming to a time very shortly here where the solar wind is decreasing, and it's not going to even offer us any compression protection at all. So 2028, if you study David LaPointe's work, he talked about the primer field collapse. By that point, Rolf Witche is saying that, solar wind speed is going to be below 30%, which is almost a nothing burger of wind coming up as soon as 2024. And, you got to think about that. If there's no solar wind, our magnetosphere would puff out like a super giant cotton candy ball. The thing that keeps it compressed is that magnetism and that solar wind hitting it and buffeting it, charging it so it stays tight. The faster the solar wind, the tighter our magnetosphere, the more those jet streams are locked in place. That's why at solar maximum, we get some of the best weather, clearest skies, most stable growing seasons. But then when you come into solar minimum, as you do, even if you go on the 11-year solar minimum cycle average, you start to see in the lows and ebbs and lows. Grain traders trade on this a lot because they know coming into the low of the solar minimums on the 11-year cycle that there's going to be changes, that there's decreases in certain crops, and that the jet streams move, growing seasons shrink, more moisture here or there. But then when we come on these 400-year or 2,000-year cycles, these are something entirely different. It's just orders of magnitude above. So what we're coming into, in my personal opinion, is well above a 2,000-year event, 33,000, 6,000, 10,000-year event we're about to head into here. So if the solar wind speed goes to, below 200 kilometers per second, or even down to like 100 kilometers per second, what's going to happen to the Earth at that point? And that's where we're heading right now. I mean, there's a few days last week where it barely even reached 300 kilometers per second. So really what's going to, what kind of particles can hit us at that point if there's no solar wind, no compression on our magnetosphere? Man, a fly could fly from space and just make it down to the surface of the Earth. A mosquito could make it through that at that point.
I've been thinking a lot about the timing of everything. And we talk on here a lot about food shortages, supply chain distribution problems, and things like that. We were kind of discussing, I guess, the family, what would actually happen if the power just went out, like totally. How long should you actually wait? And we got into the discussion that, what is the reality versus, being patient? Somebody might want to be patient and wait things through. This is just a blackout. The problem with this is if it's the one, the blackout that puts things out. The longer you wait in a city that you live in, the harder it is for you to be somewhere else where you need to be. And the odds on you dealing with people probably isn't that good. So we were talking about that. What would happen first? Well, we know pretty much the army or the military one will be out doing their own operations. And really, I don't think that people should be scared of anything unless they live by a military and they see the military just disappear. Like not telling them what to do, not handing out water, not doing none of that stuff, just vanish. They all get on planes, you see them leave, they're gone, or something like that. We kind of realized that the first thing that would happen is people would start to catch on that things aren't going to be turned on in a few days. And when that happens, there will be groups of people that are armed with trucks and trailers that are emptying out house by house every piece of food and useful item that there could be, which means that you're probably not going to fight that off. Now, it seems like the powers that be or the government also know this is what's going to happen next. And that's why we live in a just in time type distribution society, so that there will be very little on hand at any given place to be taken, which means that there won't be supplies like you would think there would be of a lot of stuff in the hands of people. It's going to be very small. It's not going to be like people think, like on The Walking Dead or some other thing where they go house to house. Oh, I found a can of corn. It's going to be cleaned out completely. It's going to be like a barren wasteland where there is no food and there is no water. And any spot that you can find water naturally is already going to have people camping or occupying that area. So what is it that you do in this type of, scenario if you're not someone who owns a farm or has been prepping or thinking about this day coming? God forbid that it does or doesn't, but the odds are that it's going to, and it seems like a manufactured thing. So, like, what in reality would someone do if they realize the lights are out, they're not coming back on, and there's no help coming? What do you do?
The first 24 hours is probably the confusion time when you could travel the most safely, 24 to 48 hours, because everybody else will be super confused as well before those organizational types of things happen where groups start to band together and take advantage of others. And that first 24 to 48 hours, you need to get in and get quick. And then what? Do you have a place to go to? I'm way out on a farm out here, but what if people start traipsing up on the land? Are you going to lay everybody out with your 5.56 rounds? I don't think so. And at what point do you get overwhelmed by people running out to your land because they're like, hey, there's a farm, there's see smoke coming out of the chimney, they must have food. I mean, at what time and day and night would people approach your properties? I mean, in the beginning, it was going to be a lot of people walking around with a desperate situation. And again, somebody says, hey, I got a skill I can trade. If you give me some food, I can help you do that. Well, how do you even know if they're just not making something up, watched a bunch of television programs and can talk a good game, but when you give them a wrench, they don't know how to do anything.
Right.
So there's a lot of unknowns at that point. I'm just trusting in focusing with the mental thoughts and the vibration putting out there that, being protected and safe during this time, having the right people around drawn of the same mind frame that want a non-confrontational existence during this time, that let us be, and the mind is very powerful, one or two people, but imagine 20 people, all right, let this chaos, like we're a rock in a river, just goes around us. That's going to be a difficult time. I really don't have those answers because I'm already out on a farm where 95% of the people you're talking about would want to get to for that survival. Water, every time it rains, we got 3 creeks coming down the hill. More water than you could possibly shake 16 sticks at. We got a pond out here with 3 springs that are coming out, filling the pond. It's continuous water flow there. Got neighbors with different wells coming out of the artesian areas here. Plenty of water, plenty of food. It's just, how do you explain to people that are super in that mind frame of, I got to get out of the cities, I got to get what I can from anybody, I got to take advantage of, like, whoa, dude, we got endless water. And then, they're going to come and try to break in your house for water when you're like, dude, there's endless water around here. Why would you even consider that? and the food forest
Well, they
being building it out so there's enough food endlessly as well. If you just know what you're looking for, you could walk through out here in the forest in Tennessee, at least during the summer and spring and fall months, and get an enormous amount of food. It's just, I don't have those answers. You got to think about the city mind frame versus the country mind frame. Because a lot of
yeah, you
people
should.
living in the city don't understand what artesian wells are and breakthrough springs and never ending water supplies. And they're just thinking, it's in a can, it's in a bottle, I got to get it. Because they're not used to nature providing it for free.
Yeah, it's a whole mindset that I don't think it's just city people. I think a lot of people, even in the country, have become complacent with technology and the dollar store and Walmart and things like that, because their families have some kind of income that supports them doing things without work. But I kind of wanted to get into, we talk about it a lot about what ifs, but there's some realities that I don't think the public's willing to face. And it's like a timeline. And in my opinion, like 3 or 4 years after the worst of it will be the best time on earth for a lot of people. Um, I know that sounds messed up, but first you'll have a bunch of elderly that are going to die because they don't have heating and cooling needs. So that's all going to be within the first couple weeks. Within the first month, we'll follow all of the people that depend on medications, diabetics that can't, keep their insulin cool, things like that. They're going to just die. I mean, it's nothing like they were victims of violence or anything like that. These are just things that are going to happen when there's no electricity. I do know people are pretty, industrious and have ingenuity and everything, and maybe they can think ahead. But I don't think mass populations are thinking about what do we do with the people that need a constant supply of products to be alive. Like I don't need anything. I'm not on any pill. I've never been vaccinated. I get sick. I just deal with it and keep doing my life like I normally do when I get sick. I keep working. I keep doing whatever if I can. If I'm too tired, I might relax or do something. But I don't think that the general public knows what to do whenever their system stops working. I mean, like they don't know, like what do they do if they break a leg? They just don't know. They go to the hospital, they call 911. But what do you actually do if you don't have all of these authoritative services, quote unquote, but really they're your masters that are telling you how you're going to live your life? What do you do without them? I guess my question is not really to you, David, but to the public. Are you afraid of freedom? Because freedom is coming. It's going to be ugly at first, but afterwards, a lot of people that are planning ahead and have a symbiosis with the earth are going to come through with flying colors to the other side, in my opinion.
Yeah, the medical is going to be the biggest thing for almost everybody because having a wood burning fireplace, getting through the winter, being able to grow crops, store it, fresh water supplies, cooking, you can cook you can cook with wood, so the basic necessities, and then, your sewage, getting rid of that so you don't contaminate your water supplies, etc. Well, that's the basics to stay alive. But then during the day, you're going to have to go through and do things to continue those systems. So getting hurt and medical is going to be, I think, the number one thing that's going to take down a lot of people because, when you said break the leg, you're going to have to bite that belt when somebody snaps that thing back in and try to reset the bone. Like we, used to make fun of the cowboy movies and whatnot when they would bite the belt or somebody would, cauterize something or whatever. But going back to the basic rudimentary, that might be what it comes to. And for me, just a personal thing, I bought online on Amazon a practice suture kit. It comes with all these different kind of wounds in it, and it's a flat piece of rubber that mimics skin, and there's different kinds of cuts in it. So maybe you were cut by a serrated saw blade, or maybe you were just cut super deep with a knife, or maybe something had ripped open, like part of your skin got ripped off, and you have to put it back on. Well, this allows you to do, and they even have things that you can put inside, like these black, I wouldn't say sand, it's almost like black sand, so you can put it in there to see if you can even clean it good enough before you can start to suture it. But then the suturing in itself is a whole different thing. You might think, oh, I can just, string it up, and no, it's not that easy. It takes a little forceps, and, you got to get the gloves on, and but just to practice the rudimentary skill of even putting stitches in somebody. That's a huge thing. And then who would even have the Novocaine or the painkillers to stitch somebody up? If you don't have that, they're literally going to have to grin and bear it while you sew them up. And, moving through, it's going to be great to have a lot of grain alcohols, anything. If you can get Everclear or some of the incredible high alcohols, you can make all kind of tinctures with that. You can store medicines after ultrasonic separation. Mike Adams doing a lot of stuff with the using an ultrasonic cleaner to get the constituents out, using an aqueous bath or just putting water in there and separating, get the constituents that you want out of whatever product it might be, from star anise to fennel seeds, whatever you're going to use, and then to store it using some alcohol. But, you got to think of like a pioneering lifestyle. The medical part of it is going to take down an enormous 90% of the population. If you can get the medical wired out, almost everything else will fall in place. It's going to be the medical end of things that is really going to be the pivot point for groups of people or the survival. You crush your leg on a farm machine at that point where there's no medical, you crush it. I mean, how do you amputate somebody's leg and stop the bleeding so they don't bleed out? There's all these kind of crazy things to think about in the medical end of it.
Yeah, I don't think most people are prepared for that. I've done things, to myself over the years. Practiced doing things like exactly like that, stitching myself up. And it's not an easy thing because you're not necessarily going to be hurt in a place that's easy for you yourself to do it. So just like you said, some things that you get hurt, you can't even take care of without another person. So for those lone wolf type people that think they're just gonna, they're just going to run against the world alone. That's nice until you do break an ankle or something like that. And I'm sure that there are ways to make casts and things like that. But these are all things that people should be thinking about long before it happens. I mean, the last minute, and that's the thing. What do you think that there are some real indications that you would know that a blackout is the blackout? How would you know that this is the one? Because I think a lot of people are going to fall into this thing where they're complacent, and even though they're prepared and they have all this stuff they thought about, they're not going to use it when it happens, because they're just going to sit there and they're thinking, well, they're going to turn the power back on. And then before they know it, they're going to be stuck, so to speak, behind enemy lines. And they can't go to their bug out location or things like that. So it might be a good idea for people to maybe take classes on not just self-defense, but even combat training. I think would not be too far-fetched for someone to do. Now, you do have to worry about some things. I don't know if you remember seeing that article that I sent you, but it basically broke down how the FBI pays attention to certain articles and who reads them. And they want to know who every single reader was that read that. And I've told people on my channel that before, that there is no privacy. You have electronic devices all through your home. Every keystroke, every word, every email, every text, it's all metadated and taken down and recorded. So just imagine that the government is actually wanting to know what you read about, so much that they want a copy of every single reader and their IP address. I guess we can get into that in a minute.
Yeah, it takes it down a whole rabbit hole there, doesn't it? Because, my browser history, because of all the enormous amount of research I do to put together all the videos I do on ADAPT 2030 and then the podcasts and, trying to weave together all this info that I go through daily. I mean, I'm going through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of websites a day. Even if it's a single click to look for video image search or just like an image somewhere. I mean, every time you click an image, it comes up as a new URL that you clicked on the image. So you go through 15 images looking for something. I mean, what kind of data are they getting on? Obviously, they know what sites you're going to, especially if I'm going to like Mike Adams' natural news site. They know, oh, that's a certain kind of person. I mean, yeah, health is one thing. Going to the Health Ranger site or going to WebMD, those are two different genres of people. So if you're heading over to Health Ranger, natural news site, or over to WebMD, WebMD is more like, the mom and pop, average conservative, just believes everything government says. You're going over to Mike Adams' site, that's like a, okay, this person's talking about freedom, rights for this, that, and the other. and then trying to get on the medical side of all these alternative ideas of what different constituents inside natural herbs that you can buy cheaply will allow you to cure some of your problems, not continue. Anyway, speaking of continue, and I'm here, David Dubine, your host, along with Ransom Godwin, 420 TV, Freedom Films. We're going to take a 2-second break, and we'll be right back after this to continue. And I know Ransom wanted to get a few other ideas. We'll talk to them.
Right back after this message.
Be evasive, but that doesn't mean that they're telling the truth as opposed to fiction.
And Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, there were giants in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came and also the daughters of men, indicating that there were giants before the Nephilim.
And sons of God, plural. They weren't talking about Jesus coming down.
No, that's right. Yeah.
I'm Steve Crawford, host of Factor Theory Live. Join me every Sunday night from 10 p.m. till midnight Eastern Standard Time on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Check it out.
Transcending time and space, let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all of her guest secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Galactic Interstellar Council on Revolution Radio Studio A, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Join us as we traverse the starseed paradigm, as expressed in the time-space continuum that we know as the divine expression of love and light. Integrating this conscious unity into the galactic paradigm. So welcome all, both terrestrial beings and galactic beings as one. So be it. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
If you think for 1 second that the Capitol will ever treat us fairly, you are lying to yourselves. Because we know who they are and what they do. This is what they do, and we must fight back. You can torture us and bomb us. Fire is catching. And if we burn, you burn with us.
Good evening.
Are you awake yet? I hope.
We've tried for years and years to use passive resistance and loud voices to make a change. But time is over. Your governments around the world have no other goal than to decimate your entire existence at the hands of the bankers and the elites. The war is coming, and it's your choice to decide if you want to be a warrior or a victim. Denial is not a choice anymore. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet. Not giving up. Revolution Radio. All right. Thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And yeah, we're going to get back to your host.
And I'll give the yay up to Ransom Godwin, 420 TV, Freedom of Films. Dave Dubine along with you here for the next hour of many Ice Age conversations. Now, please remember, Revolution Radio is listener supported. So if you like this type of content and you appreciate free speech, please support financially something like this venue right here. You can go to freedomslips.com, right at the nav bar at the top, find a way to send through PayPal. Any kind of support would be helped and necessary to keep the production running. There are costs, for every hour that station's broadcasting. And as we go through the constriction of your thoughts and ideas and others' thoughts and ideas, the playing field is narrowing down, if you will, to venues that still allow thoughts like this, whether you like them or don't like them, to be put forth to the public arena. You should be smart enough to make your own decision whether this resonates with you or not. Regardless if it does not, great. Thanks for listening. But still, to be able to speak your thought, whether it's liked or disliked, that should be freedom of speech. And that's what this platform allows here. So if you think that's valuable still in this day and age, consider a donation. So as Ransom and I were chatting last hour before we went to the break, I wanted to just start this hour off with raging inflation and some of the ideas that are coming out with central banks and whatnot, because the whole entire movement from this point forward is going to be distraction away from the point where a lot of people aren't going to be able to afford things. So let's look about moving forward here. So these are 5 signs that raging inflation is happening across the planet, but also centered in the United States. Now, why is it centered in the U.S.? Why is it not centered in the EU or something? Should be another question. But here, number one, these are 5 different points. So we'll start the hour out with inflation tends to hit those at the bottom of the economic food chain hardest because the core food and energy, when it increases, the wages are not increasing anywhere remotely close to. When's the last time you got a 25% pay increase because the price of petrol increased 25% or your food prices doubled? You see where that one goes. Number 2, the biggest banks in the world are now sounding the alarm about the inflation crisis. And you see every headline across the way. Core inflation's heading up. It might take until 2030 to reemerge after the collapse here. When banks are talking about this, yeah. Number 3, housing prices continue to soar into the stratosphere, not only in the United States, but almost every country across the world. Number 4, used cars prices have officially now entered absurd territory, 26% up so far this year in 2021 alone. And the rent as well, you could add right on top of that for a 45% increase in rent prices. And number 5, food prices continue to surge higher. And my own call by the end of the year, when we come into this dismal harvest season globally, because of more volcanic ash in the atmosphere, cooler temperatures, which I'll get into a couple of outliers, shall we say, like summer snow across Scandinavia, Earth's global temperatures below the 30-year baseline, record cold across Vancouver, coldest since 1899, rare June snow in British Columbia and Alberta. It just keeps going on and on. Polar record cold gripping South Africa. The signs are all around us that food's going to be getting a little more expensive and growing seasons are going to constrict. So, Ransom, you left off with the idea before we hit the break, so please continue. I just thought I would throw some ideas out there because it is getting a little absurd now with food pricing and the distractions of everybody pretending that it's not happening and people trying to pull back and put their heads in the sand like a bunch of ostriches, like, oh, everything's going back to normal. It's completely not going to. And those who believe it is, I feel a little bit, I feel a little sad for them because they're still living in the dream that is never going to come to fruition.
And how do you explain that really? Because, I know a lot of people, and I'm talking about a lot of people from whatever caste, you might have an idea of the lower caste to the top caste. I mean, I know millionaires, I know people out on the street, people with PhDs, lots of them. Ironically, I know a lot of people that are really intelligent people, engineers, mathematicians, things like that. And how do you explain those people still not getting it? You know, they're so smart, they're really intelligent people, yet those are some of the people that hold this big naivety, or however you say that. They're really naive people about the way things will go when society collapses after certain steps we've seen in the past that are repeating now in the place where we live. Hammer and sickle time. I'm just gonna, because I harp on that, so I'm gonna leave that alone. But things are changing in so many different ways, and I kind of left off talking about the idea that everybody gave up after the revelations of Edward Snowden. Um, that the government, our government, other governments like Germany, France, England, Saudi Arabia, China, Japan, the list probably goes on to agencies we don't even know about. And they're all watching you, taking your data, watching your gait when you walk, finding out what products, really fancy you and what things you don't like. They know how much money you have in the bank. They know all of these things about you. And now, it's kind of commonplace, really, to find out things like this, which should bother everyone. So I'm going to switch over to this article again. USA Today is fighting a subpoena aimed at their readers of a Florida FBI shooting story. Now, I don't care what the story is about. The main, and they do this a lot. They give the public really heavy ideas, but they disguise them as some kind of topic or story. The real headline here should say, government attempts to, steal metadata. Government wants to spy on every single citizen. Government wants to know what you're reading, everything about you. And why would they want to do that unless they were planning on predicting something that you might do in the future, which I might say is kind of like the pre-crime civilization we live in. But also, what are you going to do when society breaks down? This is a math problem that they have. There's people in think tanks thinking about how they can do this. Now, you may not believe that's going to happen, or you may believe it's going to happen. You may take globalists for their word and believe that they actually do want to reduce the population. You could believe people like Bill Gates, who says that through, certain kind of medical treatments, he could reduce the world's population. That seems to be a goal that they have, but it might not be a goal so much as it is a reality that they are privy to the real knowledge about. So when society starts collapsing, the government wants to know what every single citizen is doing, what they own. And I think the reason that they hate cryptocurrency so much and prepping is because it's that little gray area in which they don't have a crystal ball into. So, they may know that your bank account's going up or down, but they don't really know what you're investing in or what you're getting. They can't really control your money, things like that. And then whenever you're prepping without, using Amazon, because you can buy things from Amazon, but you got to keep in mind that Amazon is Jeff Bezos, and Bezos is real, comfy with the alphabet agencies as well. Matter of fact, any corporation, if you look back not too far in the distant past, or in the short past, you'll find out that most corporations, billion-dollar corporations, either telecommunications, department stores, whatever it may be, is spying on you, and they're helping the government spy on you. And now it's come to a point where AI is writing articles, and the government wants to know who's reading which article, which propaganda are you falling for? And this gives them accurate numbers. For when the collapse actually starts happening. They already know a percentage of people are going to be so naive they won't do anything. They know a certain amount of people are going to die because of the no electricity or not having sanitary conditions. They know a bunch of people are going to die because of medications that they could easily provide, but they're not going to. And I think this is all because they know that the world is about to change, and they want to make sure that only picked people, businesses, and way of lives come out the other end. And there's a lot of evidence to support this, and it seems maybe kind of conspiratorial because I drag information from all over the place. But whenever I see massive amounts of genetic programs going on, when I see laws being passed so that they could do more and more things that some people might find unethical, when you see governments of the world making programs to refill and populate areas of wildlife with ice age animals, including bison, wolves, etc., then you'll know that they're all prepared and ready for something to happen. So for somebody like me to be on YouTube saying, hey, it's not the end is nigh, but the reset is nigh, I'm supposed to be considered crazy for that. But it's not me, I think, that's naive. I think it's the majority of the population thinking that the government loves you as much as you think that they do.
You just put me off my fresh fried lobster. And I was going to sit down with a tasty meal of wine and lobster and think about the happy things in life, but you just ruined it for me with all this talk of surveillance, ransom. My fresh fried lobsters.
I'm sorry. You know, that just reminded me of that guy on the Matrix that wanted back into the Matrix. And he said, you know, I know this steak is not real, but it's so juicy and it tastes good. You know, he wanted to go back into the Matrix because it is a comfortable place to live. That's funny. I'm playing in the background of me right there, the Animatrix, which is the story of how governments blotted out the sun to beat the robots.
That is a great one. Yeah. And, you know, we're coming into this same point here where with all the information from the NIH and going forward, and, you know, we'll kind of keep it at those words right there. You know, people understanding that this thing's been an illusion almost all the way through, and to continue to believe what it is, we're at really a crossroads right now of you either step back into the Matrix and continue with your juicy steak and go back into your cocoon and be farmed for your energy, or you move forward and go, wait a second, something's completely wrong here. I think we are breaking into a divergence of species as we speak. The ones that want to jump back into the Matrix with their fake steak, etc., are going to go to the left that direction, and those who are seeing through the illusion continue to say, no way, I'm going to move this direction. And perhaps that's what it is, you know, in a twisted, macabre way. And I'm going to be the devil's advocate here. Now, if I am going to be like Bezos or a couple of these elitists and stuff, I would not want the same people around that I had programmed for so long to make it through the other side during this reset of not only celestial, but economic, etc. I would just be like, all right, it's going to be natural selection at its very highest level here. The people who could see through the brainwashing, that did get ready and got the skills, those are the people you want, because as hard as we tried to brainwash them, and they still saw through it. And they still prepared, even though we said everything was fine. Like, you know, the propaganda machine is there to probably, you know, shake out the wheat from the chaff. And in a strange, like I say, macabre way, perhaps this is the way they get the new world set up in the people that they really want to survive through the new world. Perhaps it's all an inverted illusion where, you know, that those 500 million that are in the guide stones are the ones that are the preppers, the ones that did make it through, the ones that did not believe in the brainwashing and did not get into the propaganda and made their way through. Perhaps that's what it's all about. But again, you know, there's so many ways to look at this side of the coin. Are we looking at the edge of the coin, the face, the tails, the heads? What are we looking at, you know?
That's funny. I was, you know, me and you were talking about censorship and them spying on us on your show, but I had it on mute over here the whole time. And I told the audience, you know, that was a really good conversation you missed. They're going to have to go over to the studio and check out that 10 minutes of stuff.
Yeah, when we got kicked offline, that was the craziest thing. You know, I'm talking, I went into such deepest thoughts, you know, and when I was doing that, I tell you, Ransom, that was like a direct download where I didn't even remember what I was really saying. It was coming from somewhere else to speak those words through me, but it was from the river of consciousness where I was pulling those thoughts. No kidding. And we got censored, and everything went down during those last 10 minutes, had to reboot. You lost your entire feed. And I kept going, and luckily I was recording on my own device, or else I would have lost all that too, because we went down across the entire thing. We had to reconnect back into the server again. That was the craziest thing. And for anybody listening, please go listen to those last 10 minutes, because whatever was said, it knocked us both off the servers and took both of our broadcasts down at the same time, which was incredibly interesting. So something of truth was in that was so deeply terrifying for whatever algorithms out there, they're like, nobody can hear that. Nobody can hear that.
Yeah. That was crazy, but that time it was me. I self-censored our thing, but I was basically talking about the article I was showing you guys, and I'll upload the audio afterwards if you guys want to catch that 10 minutes. But anyway, yeah, that kind of threw me off there because we were talking about how everything's kind of integrated today, and maybe it was a good thing I didn't bum them out because you came back on and you said you were enjoying your lobster there, and I kind of ruined it. I don't
I
mean to be
was
negative.
just making a
It's
joke,
just,
I
I think
had
people need to
scallops. It's
realize
okay.
facts. So, are they facts or at least predictable scenarios based on what's going on right now? And it may come off as a negative, but I'm trying to share that so people will think about it so that they can make a positive out of it and not, hopefully that's the goal with all of the negative things we talk about, that you can think about them yourself and maybe have a little foresight to turn it into a positive and not fall victim to some of the scenarios that we talk about.
Yeah, because I'll tell you a personal positive here. People were like, "Why do you want to move out to the land? You go buy your own food." Well, you can just go buy it from the Amish. You can just buy it from a store. Why would you want to waste the time and grow your food? Until they saw the garden, and they're like, "Whoa, you can grow all that?" And I'm like, yeah, you can grow all that. We never need to buy vegetables for the entire rest of the summer. Fresh leafy greens of varying types. You want purples, you want greens, you want yellows, whatever you want. We can get it for you. Different types of lettuces, from the arugulas to the icebergs and everything in between. You want greens, we got never-ending salads here. You want beans, we got it. You want corn, you got it. You want tomatoes, okay. Chokwe or okra, we got tons of that too. Muscadine vines, you want wine, it's cool. We got fruit, and then it's taking a whole different, talking about something and visualizing it for a person is a completely different thing than them coming out to actually see it, where they can put their fingers on it and touch it and go, no way you could do that, because maybe they were in the mind frame of it was such a difficult task that it was so far beyond that you need to get into some kind of mechanized machinery or whatnot to get on a farm to be able to grow something, versus spending 2 to 3 hours per day out in your backyard tilling up, planting, taking care of, nurturing. And the key, talking to your plants, giving thanks for your plants for being there, and the growth spurt that it gets for. And again, we talked about the secret lives of plants at one time. I tell you, the wild blueberries that I rescued, and the muscadines that I rescued, and the persimmon trees that I rescued out of the cedar forests that I cut around because I need some cedar posts. So I'm like, all right, we got a ton of cedars down on the front of the property. So as I was digging down through there in the cedars to try to cut them at the post, I started finding, muscadine vines, persimmons. And then, what I would do is when I had a wild muscadine, I would just put a T-post in, 2 T-posts, then I'd just run some 14 gauge wire across there, real supple, easy to work wire. And sure enough, those things are blooming, coming back so amazingly well. And it's the most amazing thing to watch. I'm sculpting nature as a food forest kind of thing. But people thought that was so insane when I started talking about it. I'm going to go take these muscadine vines out of the cedar trees and put them on posts. And even guys who are into agriculture were like, what? You can do that? Okay, good luck, man. Never heard of anybody doing it. But now they're seeing some of the results and going, wow, wow, what? And then another thing, when we were pulling up some of these muscadine plants, I actually saved the root areas and then replanted them just in the middle of the field, and they're coming up so to be able to put them on a trellis. So there's so many things that you can do. And, some of these things, talking about the negatives, please get ready. It's a learning curve to grow the food. It takes time. It takes effort. You're going to make mistakes. Make them now when it's not mission critical. Repairing things. I had to repair my tiller just yesterday. Handle broke, and taking the truss off there and the braces and trying to get the cabling and the gear engage thing off of there, and then go get it welded and then bring it back and whatever and put it back together again. That takes time. And there's learning curves to everything you're going to do out on a farm where you're going to be self-sufficient, from purifying your water to getting your wood ready for your wood burning stove if you're going to cook, or you're going to have campfires and cook. I mean, things take longer, like even washing the laundry. Because here's the thing about breakdown. I wanted the supply chain thing. The computer chips, we had a dryer and it broke. This is like 5 months ago. and there's a chip board on the inside there, and ordered from GE, and it's been almost 5 months since that part has been on order. So you still need to do laundry and hang stuff outside. And I've hung stuff outside with my grandma when I was younger, but it's an art form in itself of, getting it in before the dew comes in the evening and waiting to bring it in at the hottest time of the day so it still stays dry. There's a whole art form in just something as simple as washing your clothes and hang drying it so it doesn't get moisture back on it again before you get it in the house. There's a huge learning curve of trying to do things off grid or non-electricity based. Like trying to get our solar chargers for the lights hooked up for the nighttime paths walking around the house and things. There's an enormous amount of things to try to even think about with simple solar charging devices, how to keep those topped up, battery banks, all these things. Using marine batteries to try to get some of the easier lighting around the house. It's a never ending curve. And the reason I brought that up is because in Taiwan, the microchip shortage continues now, where the last area on the planet that was manufacturing microchips or semiconductors is now offline. So here's another thing that might go a little woo-woo on you. Taiwan was able to, during the entire existence of this COVID that we've experienced, the entire planet got locked down, all these things, everybody. Taiwan was completely unaffected, zero. They were still running around the beaches. Nobody's wearing masks. They're all running around. Restaurants open. Everybody, no social distance. Everybody's just like as it was in 2018. For the entire duration of this event, as we know it, as much as our lives has changed, nothing happened on the island. Nothing. Until 3 weeks ago. And they're the last, or were the last area on the planet to have mass manufacturing of semiconductor chips. And magically, they went through a whole almost year and a half, with not even hardly any cases there on the island at all. Almost none. For almost a full year and a half. Even though airplanes were coming in and out, people were traveling in and out, almost nothing. And suddenly they went from zero to just complete lockdown within a few weeks, and boom, all of the semiconductor manufacturing facilities are completely shuttered. None of them are operational right now. So that was the last area that could have provided any kind of buffer for the reset. Now you look at how many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of vehicles that are still on assembly lines that can't be completed because they don't have the semiconductors to fill out and do the electronics. And how many lines have shut down for electric vehicles, and how many lines have shut down for simple things like refrigerators, washers, dryers, these kind of things, so they don't have the chips to put in there to get you the parts. Manufacturing across the entire planet. Now, supply chain bottlenecks are one thing, but supply chain shutdowns due to not having the parts to complete your item to even get it into the supply chain is a completely set B that not a lot of people are looking at. But what just happened in Taiwan, the last trickle, and when I say trickle, a trickle of semiconductor parts coming out of there, chips to be able to allow major manufacturers to continue manufacturing, has just been shut off. That spigot is shut. So where does that leave us now? You need to take a step back from the supply chain. Everyone's focused on the supply chain. That's the distraction. You need to be looking one step back into the manufacturing that's not going forward. So even if the supply chain clears itself out completely and it's totally empty and like anything can roll at any time, day or night, and it needs to, you're going to take that step back and go, whoa, there's nothing even to put into the supply chain anymore because there's no more chips to run anything because everything became too high tech. And this is where we sit, in too high tech of a world where there's not enough chips to complete any items that could be even sent onward. So pretty much where we sit locked in time in June of 2021, and the items we have on the shelves is pretty much all we get, or at least until they start these manufacturing processes back up to get us those semiconductor chips again. We're going to be locked in time. When it runs out, my friends, it runs out.
I was just sitting here thinking about this whole scenario, and I think what you just said is maybe more of an important thing globally than it might seem like. Now, let's put aside that Taiwan wasn't having any problems with the worldwide problem at the time, and I wonder if that might be because they have a slight disdain for communist China. But let's move on to that. The semiconductor and microchips, rare earth elements. So that might be a much bigger thing. So think about this. So right now, the car lots are empty. You can't get GPUs for crypto mining or rendering film or whatever. So the market on computer is just right now, it's bad. It's hard to get anything. If you think that's bad, let's take it a step further and talk about a global environment. Now, if we were to have a conflict in Taiwan, we may or may not, as the United States, back them up. Traditionally, we would go to war over Taiwan because we're so heavily invested in the manufacturing and political outcome of the area with Taiwan. But then on top of that, we know that the majority of our military's fly-by-wire and upgraded tanks, planes, trucks, systems, drones, all have Chinese chipsets in them. They tried to tell you that they replaced them and fixed that problem, but that's untrue. They only did a small number of planes. So whenever there's a war that may or may not break out, kind of to put the cap on this depopulation thing, it seems like we need a war, and there's warmongers that think that way. You will see the America and some of the other people all of a sudden have a problem because they can't build new military weapons because they don't have these supplies that China's hoarding, and talking about a whole nightmare of fake war and problems with having things. Wait till the government's telling you, you can't have this, you can't have that. You're gonna have to stick with this level of technology. And I kind of mentioned that before, that we're stuck at this weird 2000 level of technology when we know in reality that all kinds of technologies far surpass that era of technology. There's no reason we're driving around on a gasoline powered car, except for our economy's based on it, and that's a control mechanism right now. But it has nothing to do with our level of technology. The whole fact that we're connected to a grid and pay bills every month has nothing to do with our level of technology, but just another control grid on your life. But think about this. What is the military supposed to do if the back doors that are in some of these Chinese chipsets get activated or messed up and all of these things go offline? And I'm not even talking about a grid failure or a power outage. I'm just straight talking about conventional war. We would be in some serious need for new products. However, there's a country with near the world's half of the world's population that has endless supply of people, manufacturing, and rare earth elements. Enough so that they could build a massive army in a very short amount of time. And if you've been paying attention, they're doing exactly that right now. So, we either are going to be absorbed by China, by sellouts in our own government, which seems to be what's going on right now, or there's going to be a big war between us and China, because if you've been paying attention to the globalists, people like Kissinger, people like, what's his name, Brzezinski, before he died, all of these people were already admitting that we, as the global elite, want to place a worldwide communist capitalist society, not unlike the Chinese Chicoms. And that's where we're at today. So you can put aside all of these other things and just say, what if there was no grand solar minimum? What if we weren't at a population plateau? What if we weren't, going into a new era of weird science as far as genetically and stuff like that? Just as a traditional war scenario, we're in big doo-doo.
So take the thought experiment out then. Everything is communist Chinese. Everything, the entire planet's communism, down to the full surveillance state of the technocracy, to the Uber of of even the nightmarish scenarios, and we're all locked into that. Then what? I mean, where does it transgress from that point? I mean, once it gets to that level of, the envisioning of everything surveilled, the entire technocratic systems there, beyond the dystopian movies of the most bizarre and macabre that you've seen anywhere. I mean, and then what? Once it's at that level, then what? If the entire planet, there's not even 1 square inch that's not under that system of Borg control, and then what after that, after it reaches that point?
I don't know. It seems like a society like that would have no choice but to reduce its population to get to a equilibrium of elites and workers. And then you add in the idea that the Chinese are some of the best at robotics right now in our era. They don't even need the people as much as you think they do. And we're proving that over and over again. Like a lot of you might have seen the headlines And I joked about it whenever they were trying to bump the minimum wage up, that your jobs are going to be replaced by robots. And that's exactly what you see right next to supply chain problems and supply and demand. It's not even a real thing at the stores. They just ship what they're going to ship and you get to pick through it. But even if you go to these stores like Home Depot, Walmart, etc., Sam's Club, they have 20 registers, but they have 4 or 5 operating registers that are AI. And they might have one that's not, and that's probably the one with the tobacco, because they forced themselves with authoritarianism to check IDs for certain products. That's the only reason that line's open. If they didn't have to do that by law, that line wouldn't even be open, and it would be completely run by robots. So everybody wanted a minimum wage bump of money, not considering inflation, deflationary processes, rising costs of everything on top of the inflation. And then you go to Walmart now and they're going to replace even their burger flippers and order takers. So you're going to pull up and you're going to talk to an AI, and then you're going to pull up a window, and that'll probably be the only human employee at the McDonald's other than the manager, is the little girl or guy that hands you out your robotically ordered and manufactured hamburger, most likely with grown lab meat real fast. Because we joked about Kentucky Fried Chicken, but they've announced that, yes, they are going in the direction of grown lab meat. So these are not conspiracy theories, as we were pointing out. All of these things are really happening. They're replacing meat. Meat is racist. It's bad for the environment, but not meat grown in a lab that takes just as much energy, or probably more in technology and other things, than to just grow a cow out on the farm and eat that cow. And I know we talked about it last time, but I've been coming across more stories about beef production and how they are sewing up the market where individuals or small farms cannot buy beef and they cannot sell their beef. So if they have beef, they can't get rid of it. And if they want to buy it, they can't get it because they have contracts with mega corporations not to sell their meat to regular people. Meanwhile, these corporations are destroying, not delivering, and downsizing the amount of resources they have so that they could say that there are shortages. And that's just a fact going on right now, that not only is there shortages, but they're also playing games with artificial shortages.
Yeah, but the managers in McDonald's, you talked about being a girl or a guy. Why didn't you ask what their gender identities are? Don't you know, Ransom, there's more than just a girl and a guy? Hey, that's facetiousness. The facetiousness. Hold on. Just trying to interject a little humor into the conversation here.
You're right, but the robot's genderless already, so I got that covered.
Okay,
It's
yeah,
non-binary.
that's a non-something. Not it's a non-electronical thing or whatever. Could be. Is that an identity? A non-electronical? Is that an identity? Is that a new one? Number 697. Non-electronical. Yeah.
Non-binary because it's, tapping into the D-Wave and the super supremacy computer there, and we're using quantum bits, not just zeros and ones. So it's not even, it's a non-binary.
Ransom, wait, that's being discriminatory toward the computers, because when you say non-binary, because it's ones and zeros, and if you say it's non-binary, you're excluding them. Come on.
Well, no, not really, because quantums are ones and zeros at the same time. See?
See, now, okay, Mr. Quantum, I guess that's a different differentiation of non-binary inner quantum, then that could be added to the whole list of things, right? Hey, let me throw a little something about beef here in Tennessee. So I was having some more of my land cleared in the back because we want to put a bunch of beehives up and down one of the hills. And one of the guys who helps me, his name is Ben, super cool guy. He has a land clearing business along with his family's real estate business, but they also do some cattle ranching. So we were talking about cattle, and speaking of buying a cow, they were selling half carcasses, and the minimum sell that they do, being individual cattle ranchers out here in Tennessee, was 400 pounds. He's like, we might be able to do a half, or maybe even, because you might be able to even do 200 pounds on a minimum buy. So you got to think about that. It's already been cut, packaged for you, and you get, whatever it is from the T-bones to the sirloin to the rump and all the other cuts that are in there. A lot of hamburger, of course, with the leftovers. But The minimum buy, think about that. If you're going to be buying any types of beef, you're not going to the store to get like a 2-pound, 5-pound pack. Your minimum buy, if you're going to go out onto what you're talking about, where they're trying to get rid of some of these, cattle, whether it be Angus, steers, whatever it is out there, minimum buy 400 pounds. Like, who has enough space in their freezer for 400 pounds? You're going to need to be getting around with a bunch of other people and then trying to get that together. Where do you put 400 pounds of beef, as a single person? Even if you had a chest freezer, yeah, I guess you could stock it all the way full. But what if you have just a couple regular freezers like normal people do in their homes? They got the refrigerator and then they got the freezer at the top or at the bottom, wherever. So how many families would you need to split up 400 pounds of meat with before it would be worthwhile to get in with how many families to then go buy those 400 pounds?
Well, you're supposed to be eating bugs anyway. You're not supposed to eat that beef. That's racist, man.
Cicadas are here, we could start eating those, but wait, there's some kind of a bacteria in the gut. And I can't believe they're pushing eating cicadas, but then all these other news articles you see, there's like some kind of weird gut bacteria in the cicada that could transfer to the human. So what is it? We eat the cicadas, we don't eat the cicadas. There's bacteria in the cicada's gut system, or it's a perfectly healthy. And then they're talking about mercury that's been in and pesticides and things. So those things have been laying in the ground for 20 years, absorbing all that stuff. So what is it? You're getting all this mixed messaging on the protein insect thing of just the cicadas coming out right this year.
Yeah, and by the way, they came out late too because of global warming and whatnot. No, actually, they said it was because it was too cold. It came out late. I'm not eating cicadas though. I don't care if you put some hot sauce on it or what you're doing with it. I've long known that can jack you up. Not to mention the the bacterias, but bugs carry all kinds of viruses and they carry extremophiles. So it's very possible that no matter how much you manufacture it or cook it or process it or whatever you're going to do to it, that you could still have a chance of getting some gnarly, really rare stuff as far as the human diet or immune system, because we don't eat bugs. We're not bug eaters. Now, if there's no life out there, and it's really the maximum of the solar minimum and things just so hard out there, I'm not saying you shouldn't eat a bug to survive, but that should be a last ditch effort when you're near death already and you just can't do anything else. So let's back it up and talk about some positive things that you can actually do. Like, what if you don't, like, that's kind of why I get into that. What if you don't own a farm? And I'm kind of asking the audience too, what are you going to do when things change so dramatically that you have to form a new life system around the new, variables or parameters that are given to you? What if you can't eat beef? How are you going to sustain protein? And, like on a farm, there's beans and there's other things. You got lentils and other things, but nothing replaces animal fat for the human brain. And this is a problem that people are going to come up with. Vegans know about it. They don't like to talk about it, but they begin to get health problems from eating nothing but vegetable products. It's just we're not made for that. So what are we going to do? Well, all of the other hominids in these past magnetic field collapses that have had issues, they all ate a lot of meat. They ate a lot of meat because that's what was out there. Now, that may have added to the mass extinction that also happened at the same time. However, there's not many options out there. I have a book that tells me what's edible in North America, and I'm sorry to tell some of you vegans, but when it comes wintertime, for most of North America, there's really not much to eat as far as vegetation unless you're growing it inside or in a greenhouse and things like that. And those are things that you'd have to protect. But in the forest, there's only really one source of food, and that's meat. You're going to have to find meat. Now, what's going to happen when all the meat's gone in the first 3 or 4 years? The only answer to that is to have people that have livestock that they've been saving. And that may be why, when you look back at the deluge, some of the kind of animals that they saw come down is at the same places that they started agriculture. And that may be because those were the only domesticated animals that they had left, whatever disaster happened last time. And they're clearly smaller and domesticated compared to, like, big goats and other similar animals in the wild. right before the deluge had big antlers, big hooves, big muscles, everything shrank down. And I wonder if that's possibly because not only were they domesticated, but they went through a long period of semi-starvation, which, and then we get back into the explosion of evolution and the loss of lots of life on the earth in these periods that we're about to go in. So nobody can argue at this point that the magnetic field is not collapsing and that we're having a wandering poles going on right now, which is really putting a lot of weird situations for the earth to be in without a magnetic field. So anything that comes out of the sun or burps our way or anything that comes out of the universe now, we're completely just about unprotected at this point, already. So if it collapses down even further, we have some weird things in our future to look forward to. Positive things.
Let's go hunting beaver.
I'll eat a beaver if I have to.
Me too. There's a couple 30, 40 pounders down on our lake here on the pond that keep rebuilding the dams. So it's time to go beaver hunting. And that's one of the things that you can take off season or not off season, but just full year round here in Tennessee. But you cannot hunt at night with thermal imaging. It's a daytime hunt only. So probably one of the easiest things, and we're going to do this weekend. We're going to go tear apart part of the dam. And there's 4 dams where they've plugged up all the outlet drains and the lake's starting to spill over, or I should say the pond's starting to spill over in certain areas. And it's not letting the water flow as it did. So there's a little bit of algae starting to build up. So going to go tear apart part of the dam and just wait for them to come and rebuild it. And we saw a 30 pounder down there the other day. I didn't have anything with me to take it, but we tried snare trapping, nothing. The beaver's pretty smart, so it's going to be coming down to the old school, tear apart part of the dam and wait for them to come and repair it. I don't know if it's just an innate thing or it's just part of their nature. When you rip their dam apart, they're going to be back there to repair it within, a certain amount of hours. So think about what off frogs, fish, turtles. There's going to be an enormous amount of fish in ponds and lakes that aren't going to be caught. Because fish, you can't fish out an entire lake unless you're using a net. And even then, there'll probably be some eggs laying around that'll turn back into, or, birth new fish, or maybe a bird will fly by and then something will be attached to it and it'll somehow, repopulate the lake. We see that a lot. We got geese flying. There's like a full family of 6 geese down there that are always there. They walk up through my vineyard area and they're always nibbling bugs on the ground. I love those things. But there's an enormous amount of protein sources if you really think outside the box. Birds, that's too common in birds, whatever. But think about snakes if you can find them, although it's illegal to kill snakes in Tennessee. A rattler, you might want to take that one out with some snake shot or whatever. Rattlesnakes, I would say good, but I'm going to say not good because, rattlesnakes are a little dangerous, unpredictable. And if you got a few rattlesnakes around your property, you're going to want to either get those and remove them and take them to another place and let them go, which somebody else is going to be super angry. That's like somebody releasing a raccoon on your property. Somebody else like down the road 5 miles gets a raccoon, traps it into one of those safe traps and comes and drops a raccoon on your property. You can be like, dude, that's fighting words right there. You just dropped a raccoon on my property. What are you doing? So can you imagine the ferocity of, hey, I got 2 rattlesnakes I'm going to let go on your property? Like, what's in the box? What are you putting on my property? 2 rattlesnakes? Oh, thanks. So there's all kind of protein sources out there that are available if you know how to hunt and look at different times of the days, nights, and seasons. And juniper berries too. Those purple berries. Yew tree berries, if you crack into the seed, it's poisonous, but the supple fruit on the outside. I trained with a couple guys who were survivalists in the UK, and they were on the yew tree berries. And, when we were up there picking those, where were we? We were over in Glastonbury. And we were down at the tour in Glastonbury, and they have these yew trees, and they're considered extremely poisonous. And the guy was with John was like, hey, just, don't break into the seed at all. Just suck the purple off of there and then just spit out the seed. Same thing with juniper berries, it's all kind of stuff available for you in the cold season, if but there's really not much. Juniper berries and meat. So how far are you willing to go off your normal diet track to continue to have meat? And that's a real question for a lot of people. Are you willing to eat a beaver? Are you willing to trap a raccoon and clean it out for 5 to 7 days, feeding it corn to kind of get its gut tract clear before you can cook it? How many people have cooked up groundhog for 3 days in a boiling pot? I mean, you might laugh at Tennessee, hillbillies or whatever you want to call them out here, but these people are good folk that have some real traditional ways of life that is still really intact. Yeah, you can make fun of everybody playing banjo and making moonshine. That's part of it. But the things that are hunted and prepared out here have been done for thousands of years from the Native American cultures all the way to today. So what's in the forest that you can't eat that most people won't eat? You got to go above and beyond what is, quail in a store is a stretch for people in America. You put quail on the regular supermarket shelf in most American supermarkets, it probably wouldn't sell.
Yeah. I'm going to have to say, though, that I've been known to eat a beaver or two. And I think maybe Tennesseans maybe got it wrong. You shouldn't trap the beaver. If you want to catch a good beaver, you got to go out. And I disagree with you. You do hunt beaver at nighttime. They're found at nightclubs, at supermarkets, at other places. If you want a low-class beaver, you might go to the beaver club. And, their beavers are nesting animals. So, they probably have several young at home. If you're going to eat the beaver, you're going to have to pay for the beaver and all its offspring. I'm just saying.
Can't hunt them at night, man. It's a 0 night hunt animal out here.
But no, I'm telling you, you can get you some nice beaver if you got to go looking in the right places at night. The dollar store is where you get a lot of beaver there. They're walking up and getting some drinks. I'm kidding. I'll stop. I couldn't help it when we were talking about eating beaver. That's all I kept thinking of back in the day. You're right. My ancestors are a long line of beaver hunters and eaters.
Hey, the beaver pelts, that's what propelled Canada into the superpower of economy back in the day was everybody, it wasn't the East Indies Dutch Antilles companies. It was, where were they up in Sault Ste. Marie when they had all the outposts up there for all the beaver hunters to come back with the pelts and then trade for gold.
Yeah, but never pay for beaver, though. You don't do that.
Don't pay for the beaver. 5.56 round into the beaver. Is that enough?
Yeah, no, yeah, no. There's a lot of stuff like that people discount, like you were talking about groundhogs. One thing that I did see in the city when I was living in Maryland at Andrews Air Force Base is on every little curb there were several groundhogs coming out of the drainage from underneath, and they were using the little drainage systems to live in. And I kept thinking about that. There's a little 20-pound fur coat and a bag of meat there. Not to sound mean for people that like the little animals, and they're there for your survival. I mean, I just hate to say that. And you're right. The Native Americans have been hunting, trapping, and using the raw resources of North America, just like every other ancient man was doing across the globe. So why would we be any different once the grid's down? Essentially, we are no different. However, there are some positives I kind of wanted to get into. In our era, we don't have to start from scratch like some of these other people did. We can save books, hardback books. There's plenty of information and resources right now that people could at least get partially prepared for a different future right now. What are some of the things that kind of blow your mind about living in today that are positive things that you could do now that you just couldn't do the last time this probably happened?
Yeah, an enormous amount of resources for building things that you would need. I mean, there is every blueprint and diagram plus every possible screw, nut, and bolt piece of wood, lumber that you're going to need to be able to put up a greenhouse, to put up a storage shed, to put up a trellis, to put up whatever you need in terms of storage sheds themselves. I mean, whatever you could possibly think about building right now with your fingers and access to the widest array. Back in the day, you got nails and that was it. Nails. Now, how many types of screws are there? There's roof screws, deck screws, metal screws, concrete screws. I mean, you can get anything you want at a moment's notice. And I would be perusing all of the most commonly used nails and screw sizes for the future. Because if you're going to need to build something, there's going to be an enormous, I was talking to somebody, I had an interesting conversation about the future. And I was saying, I was thinking about buying one of these LT25 portable sawmills because I have a bunch of pine trees up on the property, and we were going to cut them down and make it an open field, 2 acres of solid 60-foot pines to take down and turn that into field. But it's southern pines. I mean, they're an invasive species, but they were brought here for lumber production. So to clear it out and turn it into a field, it's going to be a better use of space than leaving it as is. But then I was talking to this brother, like, you know what? If we're talking about a grid down situation that you're talking about, and we also believe that might be coming, is like with the massive loss of life and population, you'll be able to strip houses bare. And there's so much wood and lumber and all things that have been built up and laying around that the milling lumber will be the last of the needs of you, because you could go in and take down a house and have more lumber than you could possibly imagine. So getting books that teach you how to build with the blueprints and the screws, the configurations, the diameters, the lengths, the thicknesses, the heights of everything, that would be the most valuable for you. And if you'd be able to construct a chicken coop, and all these things that are diagrammable and laid out for you, and then practice the skills. Because that's really what it's going to come down to again. Barn raising parties and building the stuff by yourself, not going to Amazon anymore for it, but being able to build yourself the things you need for your own continuation of a lifestyle. That would be my answer.
Yeah, that's a lot of good stuff, and you're right. That is actually a lesson out of the past. I mean, you look through all Egypt or South America, and you can see how they cut and used stones that were already there from the previous civilization. So I don't think we'd be, that far away from that. You might, a bunch of people down there, except for, some of the stuff, if there's really a reduced population, and I want to get back to this, a couple years after it's bad, it'll be good. Can you imagine going to the Holiday Inn and just, that's a whole building that's just open for people to live in. There's going to be houses, surplus in houses, if people don't burn them down and destroy them during the transition. Just think about all of the extra stuff that's going to be out there for the people that come through the other side. And then not to mention that people will be missing things, like certain things. And then when trade starts again, we'll get back to somewhat of a free market system where, an apple might be worth a lot if you haven't had an apple in a couple of years. Or maybe some oranges are really worth it to you when you live up north and you can't grow citrus. So, you can imagine, like back in the day, you had people that traveled around with fruits and vegetables, selling them on the side of the interstate. It won't be much different than that now. There'll be little markets open. The only thing that kind of puts a flaw in all this is that governments will still be around and they'll be trying to get in there. But I think there's going to be a big transition period. And at the end of that time, the people that are still around are going to have another good time. And if you remember, early last year or in 2020, we were talking about there was probably going to be a little bubble this summer where they were going to relax the rules and they would let everybody enjoy things for a little while before doubling down on more control. And what do you think, upcoming this fall, do you think things will change, or do you think they're going to continually fall apart until people take back their freedom? Because, all of these scenarios we talk about, we can't change the grand solar minimum. We can't change a magnetic field collapsing, but we can change some of the things that are happening. Like people, we've talked about it before, we can say no to some of the more idiotic, authoritative things that they're passing down. We can continually prove that things are not the way they say they are when they're not. Things like that. I think those are real positive things that people still have the power in doing. However, I think some things are inevitable, and population reduction in one form or another, in my opinion, it's going to happen. If you guys want to study something, Google population plateau or the overpopulation myth and do the math yourself on a calculator or whatever you want to do, and you'll find out that we're heading for a major depopulation event. And that's not even including governments or, any Earth changes that are thrown our way or anything from space or anything, just based on population as it's been and the trends. We're going to see a reduction in a lot of population. And I don't think middle-aged people are prepared for it either, because
Yeah, you got to think about that the way it is today. But if we would have been on free power devices, electric gravitics, and a whole different system of power generation with on-demand power in a home without the grid and all these fees, etc., it would have been quite different. Are you ready for the lockdown 2.0? Enjoy your summers. Until we say no, it continues. Dave Devine signing off right along with Ransom Godwin, 420 TV, shooting this film. See you next week. Thank you, listener.
Thanks for listening to Revolution Radio.
What the heck is the truth, Jihad?